So, as you may be aware, Need for Speed Payback got its soundtrack released a few days ago. Soundtracks for me are something which are really important in games generally. This doesn't even apply just to racing games, I'm talking about games as a whole. And it got me thinking, what is the best racing game soundtrack? So as we all know, the Need for Speed Payback one looks really, really good. Again, I'll link a video which I've already talked about that in the description. It's got a lot of, songs reminiscent of older games, kind of like Underground and Most Wanted style games. A lot more rap in there, there's a bit more rock in there. There's a lot of variation in what it's like, and it just made me think, like, what makes a good racing game soundtrack? And I thought this was a good discussion just to have on the channel. Now, obviously, music is really, really subjective, so everyone pretty much will have a different answer, really, and for different reasons. But I'm going to go ahead and talk about some of my favourite soundtracks, and I might go on to talk about just soundtracks in general, because there's a lot of good gaming soundtracks as a whole, that both, like original songs and like licensed music. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get straight into this. I think it would be a sin not to mention some of the early black box games. Hot Pursuit 2, Underground 1, Underground 2, Most Wanted. I'm going to skip Carbon and go straight to Pro Street. Those games had amazing soundtracks. One thing which I think is really important for a soundtrack is for it to kind of blend in with the game and fit in with the atmosphere. That's one thing I think Need for Speed 2015 did awfully. Those early Need for Speed games just fit the tone so well, especially Underground and Most Wanted. As we all know, Most Wanted had its Pursuit soundtrack and its Pursuit score, as well as the licensed music, and everything just fitted so well together, and everything kind of blended together so well. One of my favorite soundtracks ever to feature in a racing game. We can go into Burnout Paradise. I think this is one which has been extremely overlooked when you talk about best racing game OSTs. I like a lot of rap. That is not like, I make that quite clear. I don't talk about music a lot on the channel, but I like a lot of rap. But I'm very varied in what I listen to. And I think Burnout Paradise had an absolutely amazing soundtrack. It kind of just reflected what you were doing perfectly. The kind of rock, kind of indie theme it had. It was very reminiscent of what you were doing. It felt like, it just felt right. The atmosphere was right. The soundtrack was good. There's so many songs from Burnout Paradise, which I can still go back to and listen to this day. Girlfriend, Avril Lavigne. Bit of a guilty pleasure. Not on my playlist, but if it was on, I'd probably sing the words if I was a bit drunk. Midnight Club 3, how can we not talk about any Rockstar? Every single Rockstar game soundtracks are amazing. So I'm just going to go out and say, GTA has an amazing soundtrack. I don't think GTA's ever had a bad soundtrack, ever. Like, every single GTA is amazing for music. I've got to say, specifically, GTA 4 is my favorite. But Midnight Club, oh my lord. Some of the soundtracks from Midnight Club are just still to this day catchy, and some of the songs actually from that soundtrack I will still listen to, like a lot of the other games I have mentioned previously. I don't think I'll ever forget the opening kind of menu music to like Underground 1 and Midnight Club 3, those two specifically, and even like Riders on the Storm from Underground 2. But Midnight Club 3, there's something about when you hear house real big, cars real big, belly real big, everything real big, that is just iconic. If we're going in talking about more modern racing games, I've got to say Need for Speed The Run had an absolutely amazing soundtrack. Again, I think that's another underrated one. Again, it kind of just fit the kind of theme of you going across the US, and it felt like you were doing a road trip. It had a very road trippy vibe. So, yeah, that for sure, The Run was really good. And also Undercover as well. Undercover also had a really, really good soundtrack. As much slack as we give modern Forza Horizon games, Horizon also has an amazing soundtrack. Number 1, 2, and 3, I'm going to go out on a limb and say they are some of the best recent soundtracks we've had. I only really personally listen to Bass Arena and Pulse, like kind of in between, but I've got to say, just the vibe and stuff they give off, I don't really listen to it too much because I usually turn it up and just put Spotify on, because I don't really play Horizon like that anymore. But I've got to say, the soundtrack's actually in-game. It just fits the kind of festival vibe so well, and that's the one thing they do well consistently. I can't complain about the Horizon soundtracks, they're always good. Even Dirt 4, I know I haven't played a lot of Dirt 4 on the channel, partially because the views didn't do very well, but that's a different story for a different day. Dirt 4 soundtracks are also really good. Again, it's one of those things. A soundtrack should complement the game and the atmosphere, and I think that's something Dirt specifically does absolutely just insane. Every single time, Dirt always usually has a good soundtrack. Not gonna go out and say it's as good as like Underground 1 and Underground 2 and Most Wanted and Midnight Club and Burnout Paradise, but it's definitely on the kind of upper echelon of soundtracks. So I've listed a few games of, you know, soundtracks which I think are good. I'm going to kind of talk about what I think personally makes them. So obviously, as I said a minute ago, it's all about atmosphere. A soundtrack should be there to kind of just promote the atmosphere of the game and promote what the kind of game is trying to do. That might not make a lot of sense to a lot of people, but I'm sure a few people would click with what I'm saying. You know, if you have a game about illegal street racing and you hear, I'm a Barbie girl in a Barbie, that's not exactly like, this doesn't really fit really. You're not going to feel like you're doing anything wrong. You're going to feel like a Barbie girl. But that's not what makes a good soundtrack. A soundtrack should fit the atmosphere. That's like just obvious really. What makes a good soundtrack is when you get songs that completely encompass what the game is about. Now this doesn't only, you know, go for racing games like I said earlier. If anyone here has played Halo 3 in my opinion, and Halo 2 and some of the earlier Halo games had some of the best soundtracks I have ever heard, period. Just not even for gaming, but just period. I don't want to talk about Halo too much because I know a lot of you guys aren't really interested in that kind of stuff, but I will sit down and say Halo 3 and Halo 2 are my favorite gaming soundtracks. I'm not going to say they're number one, but they're kind of in my top 5 for sure. So let's go ahead and do a bit of a loop because I've kind of rambled here for a bit. What in my opinion is the best racing game soundtrack? It's hard to pinpoint one. I still listen to a lot of songs from Most 1005 to this day. I still listen to a lot of songs from Underground 2 to this day, from Midnight Club. There's a lot of songs I listen to from certain games, like to this day, that are really, really old. It's a hard thing to say because I've played so many racing games at this point. It's just hard to pinpoint one soundtrack which really did it for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try list 5 in no particular order because I feel like that just would be easier. So number 1 for sure, I've got to put Most Wanted up there. The Pursuit soundtrack and the actual race OST, one of the best to ever feature in a game. Controversial, but I'm going to say Underground 1 was better than Underground 2 and I'm going to put that in my top 5. Again, no particular order, but Underground 1 had a much better soundtrack than Underground 2. I'm not shunning Underground 2, it's definitely maybe just out of the top 5, but yeah, definitely in there for sure. Forza Horizon 1. I will never, ever, ever forget first booting up the game and hearing Porter Robinson language. There's something about, you know, just that the vibe and the kind of festival feel which that game gives, which has not been recreated in a Forza since then. The first one had a vibe which none of them have had at this point. It had heart, it had something to it, and I think the soundtrack was definitely one of the biggest things around that. Even the trailers, I remember one of the trailers when it was Mod Step, Put Your Light Up or something across those lines, and just the vibe at that trailer gave. I'll see if I can put it in now. Phenomenal. Put your light up. I don't ever really listen to, like I said, anything else other than Pulse and Bass Arena, but Horizon Rocks, I think it was what it was called. Again, it was so good, blended so well, and it made me kind of explore a different type of genre, which I wouldn't have usually explored, even though I do have quite a broad, you know, music taste. But I've got to say for sure, yeah, Horizon 1 without a question. I did go on about Midnight Club 3 a lot, but I've got to say Midnight Club LA I played a lot more of, and I've got to say some of the songs in there still resonate to me to this day. There's one I remember specifically from the South Central trailer. It was Rolling on the Freeway. That specific trailer, that actually gives me feels. I'm feeling myself.
West Coast on, static on the beat. Midnight Club, I'm a savage on the streets.
And lastly, it's hard to say the last one because I've kind of gave 4 really, really good ones. But I'm gonna say number 5. I don't know. I just want to keep in mind, guys, I haven't wrote any notes for this. This is all off the top of my head, like I usually do my videos. I never really write scripts or anything. So these are all that coming to the top of my head. But number 5 is a very hard one. I could be boring, and I could say another Need for Speed game, and to be honest, it's very hard to even pick a Need for Speed game because Pro Street was good, Undercover was really good, you know, even Hop Shoot 2010 was really, really good. I think I'm going to have to give number 5. Oh, it's a tie between Pro Street or Undercover, and I don't know which one. I'm going to go on a limb, and again, this could change. My opinion could very much change, but I'm going to say it's Undercover. It had a lot more variation than Pro Street did. A lot more things kind of went, like the garage music was a lot more kind of raw and gritty, and even though Pro Street did the kind of car festival thing as well, like it did very similar things that Horizon 1 did, maybe on a bit more of a grittier tone. But for me, Undercover, I've got to say, you know, the Pursuit soundtrack and the garage music and all that kind of stuff, I think that just takes the cake. I'm really happy to see that Need for Speed Payback has come back with a really solid soundtrack, and I can't wait to actually get my hands on it, you know, when it eventually comes out. So with that being said, that's been my kind of little ramble about video game soundtracks. What do you guys think is the best soundtrack in a video game, or just racing games generally, or both? I've got to say Halo 3 is up there as one of the best outside, you know, racing games. I've got to say Far Cry 3 is definitely up there as outside racing games. But again, I could rant on for ages. GTA 4 is definitely up there for one's outside racing games. But let me know what you think down in the comment section down below. That's been it from me today. If you guys enjoyed, make sure to go ahead and hit the like, subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next one. You guys have an awesome, stay safe, and peace. For fuck's sake, Skype.